Hey horse friends, my name is Rebecca Bressler. I am the founder and owner of Bressler Equine Studios. Today I would like to share about my horse Boreas' rescue story. I started looking for a horse back in June of last year. I kind of was just looking all around. I wasn't really looking at anything in particular, but I was looking on Facebook, on different websites, and at the time I lived in Missouri in Branson, so there wasn't really a lot to pick from around the area, especially with like how the horse market was at the time. But eventually I did find Boreas on Facebook. I found him on an ad on a Facebook group. His name was actually Storm, and he was advertised as a grade thoroughbred. Never been raced. He was obviously a rescue, very skinny. He had stomach ulcers. And I inquired about him. I inquired about like his price, like how long they had him for, and all of the basic information you would usually get whenever you are looking to buy a horse. And I wasn't too sure at first about like taking a rescue, because obviously there's a lot that they require, and they can be expensive. But I have always kind of had this thing about, I've always told myself, like, if I were to imagine a horse I would buy in the future, and he was in a dry lot apparently with 10 horses, and they were throwing in like 2 bales of hay a day, and I guess he was getting bullied away from all of the hay that they had out there, so he wasn't eating, and he was very, very skinny. In the pictures even you can see he's pretty skinny, and he had stomach ulcers. They were treating him for his stomach ulcers. They had bought him in March for their 14-year-old daughter. He was getting chiropractor. He was getting fed 3 times a day. So the people that I bought him from, by no means, were his neglectors. He was neglected by the people that they bought him from. He is obviously a little over 16 hands tall. I haven't actually gotten to measure him, but he is definitely big, especially for like a 14-year-old girl. I can imagine that might be a little daunting. And because of his ulcers, I was told that she was tacking him up one day, and she cinched him up a little too quickly because he has ulcers, and he pulled back on her. And after that, she was just kind of scared of him. She wasn't sure if she wanted him anymore. They weren't really clicking, and he was just too big for her. So I decided to go and see him. He was like 5.5 hours drive from me, so that was kind of a little bit far, but obviously I had to see him. So we made the trip, and then I got to see him in person. He was in a stall at first, and seeing him in person, you know, I definitely couldn't describe, like, the pictures don't do it justice, how skinny he really was. I mean, obviously he wasn't like deathly skinny, he wasn't like in immediate danger, but you know, you see that kind of stuff in person and it is a little bit shocking at first. I was a little bit weary about it, but he was super gentle. She took him out of his stall and tied him up to groom him and tack him up, and he was just like a gentle giant. And I know that horses who are malnourished don't have a lot of energy, and a lot of times that can be why they're like gentle or low energy, is because they don't physically have the ability to have energy because they're so tired from their body working so hard without enough energy. But he was sweet. He was. He was very perky. His ears were forward. He just had a good attitude about everything, even though, you know, he had been neglected. And I watched the person who was helping sell him, the owner of the barn, who the owners of Storm was his name. His name was Storm at the time. They were selling him through her. She was helping them sell him. So I watched her ride him, tack him up, and all that kind of stuff. And I did before all of that, before she even put any tack on. I felt him, felt along his back, along his legs, looked for any scarring, any kind of heat or swelling, and he mostly checked out. He had a little bit of like some scarring on one of his legs, but she said that they had checked it out and it was nothing, and I looked at it and it didn't seem like anything. So I watched him when she rode him, and he was very cute. He had like nice big movements. He still had a good attitude, and he hadn't been ridden in a couple weeks, but he still was great. He didn't even offer to buck. And he just seemed like he had a good personality. So after she got on him, I felt safe to get on him myself. I hopped on, and he's very big. I love big horses, obviously. That was another thing that I was looking for, was a bigger horse. And I just loved how I felt up on him. I didn't ride for very long, obviously, because he was skinny, but I couldn't not try him out before I bought him. So, I did a little bit of walking, trotting, just seeing how he responded to me, seeing what he was feeling, looking at his attitude. My husband recorded it so that way I could look back at it afterwards. And I loped him maybe just for less than a minute, just so I could feel it. And I liked his movement. He seemed sound. He wasn't lame. He was just skinny. And so I looked back at the video, and I really liked how I looked on him. I did like his attitude, and he seemed very calm and willing to learn, and I thought that would be good for what I was looking for. I was looking for a horse that eventually I could obviously put in my training program to become a horse working in film and stunt riding. So I thought that he would be a good fit for that just because of his personality. And so I put an offer on him. I just did their asking price because they had already put in a lot of rehab on him, and they just wanted a new horse. They were already pretty much just selling him for what it cost to rehab him. So I put an offer on him, but when I was there, I did not come with a trailer or like money. I wasn't really wanting to bring it unless I really thought I was going to buy a horse, and I wasn't really sure about him. But so later we got that handled. But while we were waiting, someone else, I guess, had looked at him, and they were putting an offer in on him too. And so I basically had to just outbid her a little bit before we did actually end up getting to buy him. And then once I bought him, I had a friend with a trailer who went and picked him up. I don't have a trailer, and I was also working that day, but he offered to pick him up. I obviously paid for his gas and that kind of deal, and he picked him up, and eventually I had heard, from his previous owners that he was prone to choking and that he gets a mash, but I was not expecting the trailer ride to arrive with us to be so, it was just, I was at work and I got a call from my friend that he was choking in the trailer, and that he was having to stop like every 30 minutes just to check on him and make sure that he was okay. And being at work and knowing that, I knew there wasn't anything I could do about it currently. I knew that I was just gonna have to trust my friend, because he had even more years of horse experience than I do, because he was older and he was sort of a cowboy type, but I just had to trust that he would do what he knew was right in the moment for Bo. And I just had to wait until I got off of work, and even then the 5.5 hour trip that it was took longer because he was stopping like every 30 minutes to make sure that he was okay, that he was still able to breathe through the choke and all that kind of stuff. And so I was waiting until like 2 a.m. for him, and he ended up arriving at the pasture at 2 a.m. And I had never seen a horse choke before, and I cannot describe how it looked in the dark, in the pitch black, with a flashlight, to see just discharge dripping out of his nose, his mouth. He was coughing, and like that really freaked me out. And I had to stay calm, obviously, because it's 2 a.m. There wasn't anything I could do, and I knew that. And I had never experienced it before. And honestly, when you think of like buying your first horse, you think that everything is going to be perfect and like it's going to be a picturesque kind of thing, but that's not how this went. And obviously I wouldn't trade him for the world, but it was really scary at first, and I kind of asked myself if I had made the right decision, if I had bought the right horse, or you get in your head sometimes about stuff like that, especially when something that you could never even imagine happening, that happens. So I just had to go back home and wait until the morning, because there was nothing I could do besides hope that he could maybe clear out the choke himself. But I came back the next day in the morning as soon as I could. I couldn't sleep, so I basically just stayed up all night and then left in the morning again after laying in bed for a few hours. And when I got there, he seemed better because he was eating grass with the other horses, and I didn't hear him coughing, and there wasn't really a lot of just discharge anymore. But I think that it had just settled in his throat, and he was able to eat grass because after a while it just kind of settled there. But then I took him and tried to feed him a little bit and groom him, and he started to choke again because obviously there was still the blockage in his throat. And when I had fed him, it started to react again. And at that point, I was wondering, what to do, because I called people and no one would come out to where he was. And so I talked to my friend again. Obviously, he was not super happy that a horse came out of his trailer choking. So he, of course, helped me. We tried to get him into the trailer that he had arrived in, but it was a very small 2-horse straight load trailer, and obviously he had some bad memories associated with it because of, however long he spent in there choking. So he, no matter what we did, he was just saying, no, I won't go in there, which I don't blame him for. And really, looking back on it, there was nothing we could have done differently, because it literally was just a handful of hay and a handful of grain that they used to get him in the trailer. And maybe they hadn't fed him anything, it might be different, but he wasn't very good at trailering, and obviously no one expected him to choke in the trailer. But we worked on trying to get him in the trailer for a really long time. Eventually I had to go to work, and I asked my friend if we could maybe try to find a different trailer, and he did find a different trailer. And at that point I had been talking to my boss, hey, I really need to take my horse to the vet. Can I please, I can't make it in today. Can I please take my horse to the vet? And she ended up working it out to where I was able to, I went into work, and then when I realized that she had worked it out, I left work. Because I was worried that if I didn't get Bo in the trailer that day, that it would be too long, that I wouldn't be able to get him in at all. So we got him to the vet. It was 9 p.m. by the time he was at the vet. So they took him in, confirmed that it was a blockage in his throat, that he was choked, and they put a tube in through his throat. That took a couple minutes because he didn't really want to do it. It kept going into his lungs instead of his throat. But they finally got it into his throat, and they flushed water through his throat to clear out the blockage. And he did a really good job. He stood there, let it happen, and they cleared it out. So that was a huge relief to finally get that taken care of. And obviously I was just kind of looking at my new horse, and it was kind of the moment that it settled in that I actually did have a horse, that I owned a horse. And so we took him back home the doctor said he can eat mash, which obviously I already knew, but I definitely took way more seriously at that point. And he was a little hoarse for a while, but he didn't end up needing like pain meds or anything. And he was doing really good. The only downfall of the field that I was keeping him in was that it was like 40 minutes away, and it was really hard to feed him twice a day because I couldn't. I had work, 40-minute drive. That's like at least an hour and a half, just there and back. So to do that twice would take up just all of my time. I wouldn't be able to do anything besides feed him, work, feed him again. And so I started looking for a different place to keep him because it wasn't realistic how far away he was. And I knocked on my neighbor's door because my neighbor, they had a field and there was a horse and a pony in it that I had been seeing every day when I drove by. So I knocked on their door and I asked them about possibly putting my horse in the field with theirs. And I found out that it wasn't actually his horses, it was somebody else's, that they were renting the field. So I had to go through them and talk to them and ask them if I could do it. And thankfully, they accepted. And I got to put Bo in a field that was literally like 2 minutes drive down, literally like right next to the apartment complex that we were at. And that's when he started like to really grow. I was able to feed him twice a day, so he was starting to have energy and look good. I fed him 6 pounds of Omeline 200, which is like Purina's performance feed. It has a lot of calories in it, and I was feeding him 2 scoops, which is 6 pounds, plus ulcer treatment for his stomach, and then alfalfa pellets, about half a scoop of it, so like a pound of alfalfa pellets in there as well. And I would soak it and stir it all up for him, and I fed that to him twice a day. And I could really tell, that it was working and that he was starting to gain weight. He was acting happier. He looked healthier. And at first, I tried to document as much of it as possible because I wanted to make sure that I was tracking his weight and making sure that he was gaining weight. And I took pictures of his body condition, and I also was feeding him the Amplify supplement, which is Purina's fat supplement, and that stuff was like little nuggets of gold because that's pretty much what got him to be so healthy in the time frame that he did. And I got his feet done because he had really bad feet. His previous farrier hadn't really shaped the shoes to his feet. And so we put new shoes on him, shaped up his feet. He's kind of flat-footed in his front feet and a little bit in his back as well, but we got that taken care of. And then, it's like you can't predict this stuff, but thoroughbreds, they always like get into trouble and they always hurt themselves. So he overreached one night. I came to feed him like in the evening after work, and I noticed that there was blood on the ground, and then I looked and I saw that there was blood on Bo's foot. And so I started to panic a little bit, and I picked up his foot, and he had basically taken out a huge chunk of his heel when he overreached. And I did not know that he overreached until obviously that happened. And I was by myself. There was blood everywhere pretty much. And I called my husband and he wasn't able to answer. I called him a bunch of times before I finally tried to tie him up and stop the bleeding, but I couldn't. And obviously, whenever I applied pressure to his foot, he pulled back, and I wasn't able to keep him tied because it wasn't safe. So I went to the neighbor and I knocked on their door, and I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty broken up. I was crying, and I'm sure that was a crazy thing to be greeted by at your front door, is the 20-year-old girl who has a horse out in your field is crying at like 9 o'clock. Not 9 o'clock, it probably was just getting dark, so like 7 at night, asking you to help her hold her horse because he's bleeding everywhere and she can't stop the blood. But she helped me. She held Bo, and I was trying desperately to stop the bleeding, but I couldn't. The tractor supply I usually went to was closed, and I couldn't find any kind of like blood stop powder. So I called my friends because my husband wasn't answering. I called them to call him and also to go to the store perhaps to buy some blood stop and some more bandages, because the bandages I did have he was going through very quickly. And eventually my husband answered the phone, ran over to the field, and held Bo so that the neighbor didn't have to anymore. And then my friend arrived with the bleed stop powder. I poured it all over his wound, and it was still like starting to come through the blood stop, so I poured as much of it as I could on there before I wrapped it tight and kept pressure on it. And after that, I just had to wait for a couple of hours to see if it would stop the blood. And when I got back, it did not. His bandages were basically soaked through, and when I unwrapped it, he started to bleed everywhere again, and so I called my friend who had helped me with the trailer to get him there. I called him because he was like my go-to horse friend. He was knowledgeable enough to help at least the situation, because we couldn't get a hold of any kind of emergency vet. None of them were answering, and there wasn't any close enough in the area. So he drove to help us. It was 40 minutes away, so that was a really long 40 minutes. But he got there, he looked at it, wrapped it, and then said to check on it in the morning, because by that time it was really late at night. So we went home. I didn't sleep again. Which the timeline of these events is that I bought him in July, and then it must have just been a month later, less than a month later, that this happened. And I checked on him in the morning. The bleeding had stopped. And it didn't look as bad as it did, obviously, in the dark, bleeding everywhere. It was pretty big, but he didn't seem lame on it, and it didn't seem like it was affecting him all that much. So I called a bunch of different people who knew about horses, and I talked to them about it, and we decided that he didn't need the vet because he wasn't lame, and it was just an overreach that if I kept clean, probably would heal just fine. So I kept a good eye on it for a really long time. I was checking it like twice a day, before work, after work, cleaning it. Did a lot of hydrotherapy. I wrapped it for a little bit of time. And it was healing, and it never affected him. Now there's a scar, but he's fine. It doesn't affect him. And it was just scary, obviously, to have experienced that. And, you know, again, I thought, like, have I bought the right horse? Like, is this what owning a horse is going to be like? But, you know, I do not regret my decision to this day. And once it was mostly healed, I picked up back on working with him. By that time, he was in a better body condition from, you know, just getting fed twice a day as much as he did for a few weeks. So we did mostly in-hand work during the time that he was healing. I didn't really do a lot with him, but then once he was pretty much healed, I did some lunging work with him. He knew how to lunge, but he is kind of not good with his whoa, and he's not very good. In the field, he would just want to, like, take off. If I asked him to go faster, he had to keep focusing on me, and realized that he couldn't just take off if I was lunging him. But we worked on that, and I also taught him how to, like, kiss me on the cheek, and I was starting to really, you know, bond with him. And he was an actual horse, you know, and we got to do things together. And I eventually got a bridle and all that kind of stuff. And I was just trying to get him more fit. And then I came one day and he had blood coming down from his forelock. And I knew it. I knew that he'd done something again. Thoroughbreds. But, he basically scalped his forelock. The skin had lifted from his head. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's gonna lose his forelock. But it wasn't awful. I wrapped him up, gave him a little headband, and just made sure that it wasn't getting infected or anything like that. And it didn't. It healed just fine, which I was very thankful for. So after that, I was a little bit more afraid to do anything, like put any kind of halter on or bridle on, because I didn't want to disturb the healing process. So I didn't do anything with him for a while again. But he still was able to gain weight, look more healthy, and eventually it healed perfectly. And you know, it was, you know, we were able to do more stuff together again. And so several months go by. I'm training more with him. I'm walking him over logs to help with his back and his top line, trotting him over logs, working with him, and hanging out with him just in general. Before we moved. We moved from Missouri to Kentucky, and I had to get a transport arranged for him. We needed papers, and obviously we had to take him to the vet to get papers, and that whole process, he still hated the trailer. I didn't have a trailer to train him in, so we had to keep training and trying to get him in the trailer and working on that, and he did eventually go in the trailer. We got his papers, and then I was able to send him off. But of course, before we sent him to go to Kentucky, he had to do something, and he pulled off both of his front shoes like the day before. And his front left was really sore from it. Literally the day that I went to go grab him, and the people with the trailer were already here watching, he is limping and is lame on his left front. Because I picked up his foot, and he pulled off his shoe and must have run around and stepped on a stone or something because it was really sore. And the guy asked me, he's like, was he like that before? Is he always like that? And I said, no. And I had to explain all that to him. But thankfully, we were still able to send him off. And they held him overnight and then shipped him off in the morning. It's a 9-hour drive from Missouri to Kentucky. So, but he arrived at the boarding facility and he was fine. So, that was a couple weeks ago that he arrived at the boarding facility. And he's adjusting, he's doing good. I'm gonna be switching him to barefoot. I found a farrier here who specializes in barefoot and glue-ons, and she has worked with a lot of thoroughbreds, and she's worked with thoroughbreds who have flat feet, so we're hoping to get him to where he is able to be barefoot. And right now I'm using Farrier's Fix on his sore feet, just to help with the soreness and toughen up his feet. But it's been really great, honestly, to not be in just a field and to be at a boarding facility, because I get to use the indoor arena and all of that kind of stuff. But, and yeah, we just did some Liberty work the other day in the indoor arena, so go ahead and watch those shorts if you want to see that. And he's doing really good. We have obviously bad weather this week, so I won't be seeing him for the next couple of days. But he's obviously getting taken care of at the boarding facility, and so that's from July to now. And that is the story of Boreas. So thank you guys for watching this video. If you would like to support our journey, please like, comment, subscribe, and tell your fellow equestrian friends to follow this channel. Check out my shorts. I post one every day, and I will be posting more long video content like this one once a week. So thank you for watching. Bye.